This is Corolla Digital.
This is We the People.
What is wrong with our country?
I don't want to believe what you believe, and you can't make.
I want to hear why it's bad to feel good.
These two political gangs don't have your best interest in mind.
Makes me proud to be an American. Makes me even smarter to be off the grid.
Stay vigilant, people.
Abraham, light up that joint.
He's a political activist and a conspiracy theorist who specializes in secret societies. He's the author of The Resistance Manifesto and has a huge following on his YouTube channel where he exposes the New World Order and Big Brother government. His latest book is Inside the Illuminati, Evidence, Objectives, and Methods of Operation, and it's in stores right now. Welcome, Mark Dice, to We the People podcast. Thanks for being with me. Let's go ahead. Let's get started with my first segment. Mark, great to have you here.
Hey, it's an honor. And, while I don't agree, everything politically regarding your stances, I know that at least what you say is coming from the heart and there are no strings attached to you.
Well, let me ask you then, what don't you agree with me on?
Well, I would rather not focus on the problems. I would just a big honor to be on the show. I would say probably the border issue, but of course, I'd rather focus on what we agree upon.
Well, remember too, the border issue. I'm living in Mexico half the years. I am biased because I live as a minority down there amongst, and I love the Mexican people. And so I probably do carry quite a bias on that particular issue. But anyway, let's get on to what we're here for. First of all, what the hell got you interested in looking up and doing research on things like the Illuminati? What propelled you to take that step in life?
Well, it began with researching 9/11, and after I graduated college in 2004 with a bachelor's degree in communication, I had a little bit of free time on my hands, and I loved researching and writing papers. And to fill that time, I started looking into the war in Iraq, and that ultimately led to the questions about 9/11 and the cover-up, and it just kept going down this rabbit hole, as we say, ultimately leading to this, Illuminati, as we sort of call it, in this network of private organizations that sort of masquerade as public entities like the Federal Reserve or the Council on Foreign Relations. And, this was back in 2004. So the social media hadn't quite really sprung up at that point. There was no YouTube. You couldn't just click to get a video. You had to really scour the internet and download videos from these file sharing sites. So, I bought a bunch of books and started studying and it just started putting these pieces together to try to get a comprehensive view of what it was that is happening in the world today.
Now, let me ask you this. Let's go back. What did you determine on 9/11? Do you believe the official story?
Well, I firmly believe that it was an inside job, that on certain levels they allowed it to happen, specifically diverting resources and investigations from being able to stop the terrorists, and on certain levels pulling some strings to ensure that it were to happen. And of course, for people who have maybe never really looked into this kind of material, that seems like a conspiracy theory until you start realizing that this is a historical military tactic, the false flag. And we have the declassified documents from Northwoods, as you're well aware of, the Gulf of Tonkin incident. So it's not that unheard of to think that the great American government, or more or less really a corrupt criminal element that has essentially whittled their way into the power structure, would do such a thing again. When I first found the Operation Northwoods documents, I was stunned. And you can't believe everything you quote, read on the internet, but I got them directly from the National Archives, did some research, found some pretty solid sources on them, and I'm absolutely disgusted to learn that our government would actually conceive of, let alone write the plans down, and then have the Joint Chiefs of Staff, as you know, the heads of all military branches, approve committing terrorism in Washington, D.C. Absolutely stunning. So the motive is there. 9/11 was and still is largely the sole reason for America's foreign policy and the erosion of the civil liberties, the Orwellian NSA spying, And the more you look into it, it just becomes this mountain of evidence. And when looking into the Illuminati, the reason I wrote my books, Inside the Illuminati and my other ones, is to separate the facts from the fiction, because as you probably know, you start going down this rabbit hole and you find a lot of strange things, a lot of bizarre claims, many of which are true, can be confirmed and sourced multiple ways. But there's also a lot of misconceptions and even hoaxes put out there, some paranoid conspiracy theories, some disinformation put out there in order to try to discredit and derail genuine truth seekers from finding out what's going on, to prevent them from getting involved and getting in the way.
Let me interject here. Who are the people that do that? Who are the people that try to destroy the truth seekers and like they've made, I know the CIA was heavily involved in making the word conspiracy theory have a bad vibes, bad connotation and all that. We've already discovered documents on that.
Well, as you probably know, Cass Sunstein, Obama's regulation czar, basically a cabinet level position, a former, current, I guess, Harvard law professor, was given a position within the White House, and he wrote white papers, which you can get. They're not classified. They're just an open secret, where he advocated having the government pay online trolls, basically, to go and troll comment sections on news articles in order to try to derail the conversation and to try to discredit the article. So, for example, if a accredited news agency puts out a story about a very damaging issue, Cass Sunstein's method of operation is to have perhaps multiple, military analysts or just contractors operate multiple online accounts to appear as if there's a whole group of people commenting on the article to try to attempt to discredit it or to try to ridicule the topic. And one of my particular favorite pieces of the puzzle is Operation Mockingbird, which is the CIA program to control the mainstream media. We always talk about, quote, they control the media. Well, how does this work and who is this? Well, Operation Mockingbird was literally uncovered in a congressional hearing in 1975, the church hearings, and there's a whole report about it. You can find clips of the actual hearing online, and they found that the CIA back in the 1970s, starting in the 50s really, was spending $1 billion in today's dollars adjusted for inflation under the table, paying off in cash advances editors and reporters for most major outlets: the New York Times, the Washington Post, Newsweek, Time, the New York Tribune, Miami News, et cetera, et cetera. It's astounding to learn that our own government was paying at this time up to $50,000 and maintained a network of individuals around the world to provide intelligence for the CIA and to act as gatekeepers and covert propagandists. And so they said, oh, just as they always get caught, they say, well, we won't do it anymore. When we know, of course, that that's simply not true. It doesn't make any sense. If I was an evil tyrant, this would be the perfect plan. And it's not a conspiracy theory. Operation Mockingbird uncovered in congressional hearings. Their report is available. You can even find a clip of Sid Mickelson, former CBS president, who was asked if the CIA still maintained relationships with reporters. And he said, well, of course they do, but they have to be a lot more careful than they did in the 70s.
Now, how do we survive this, Mark? I mean, what you're telling me is, how do we wade through the average John Q. citizen to know when they're being deceived and when they're actually receiving the truth, and that it's not an operation being done of propaganda by the government using the media?
Well, it's hard, and it's just like, as you know, to stay physically fit, you can't just go to the gym once or once a week. It's really has to be a consistent and long-term program. And so Americans, unfortunately, have fallen asleep at the wheel. Maybe we have come to believe that we have it so good that many people just don't need to watch what's going on in Washington, D.C. They're mesmerized, hypnotized by their flat screens and their social media. And so people, unfortunately, need to get involved again and actually pay attention and read books and not just rely and believe their mainstream media. And people have such a short memory, they seem to forget all of the lies that keep getting bombarded at them, such as the let's not let the smoking gun be a mushroom cloud hoax. It's astounding.
So in other words, I'm doing the right thing on all my shows when I end the shows and tell my listening audience to be vigilant.
Be involved, read some books, and it's alternative media, shows like yours, sites like InfoWars, shows like Alex Jones and others, Glenn Greenwald's The Intercept, who are bypassing this mainstream, I call it the urine stream because that's what it is.
That's a good one.
This mainstream propaganda network. I mean, in a country that has the top story on all major news networks about a celebrity dying or a celebrity getting a DUI, as you may have seen when Justin Bieber got a DUI. MSNBC interrupted an interview with a congresswoman who was talking about the NSA illegal spying, literally mid-sentence, interrupted her for, quote, breaking news about Justin Bieber getting a DUI. He didn't kill anybody. He didn't crash his car. He's some, punk who sings songs, and this is breaking news on a major television network. It's astounding.
Mark, I call it the Anna Nicole Smith syndrome.
These little distractions get replaced every few years. For a while, it was Paris Hilton. Yeah. Now it's Kim Kardashian.
Well, Anna Nicole Smith, her death got more publicity than John F. Kennedy's did.
Yeah, just a drunken, drug-abusing floozy that's just really masturbation material for morons. I mean, no real value. Same with the Kardashians. They're just American royalty. It's incredible. And much of the public just will swallow what they're fed.
Yep.
And so, but it's incredible through social media. This social media revolution in the last few years has really opened up people's eyes because we've been able to bypass these major networks and the major news stations and independent analysts.
They're sweating it, aren't they?
They don't know what to do because individual analysts or news personalities like yourself or like me can gather an enormous fan base. Some of my YouTube videos have millions of views. That's more viewers than people who watch CNN or MSNBC. And so it's incredible the power that the social media has to bypass this. But it's a nonstop job. It's like keeping healthy or brushing. Sure. You don't just brush your teeth in the morning. You got to do it every day. And unfortunately, we all have to sort of put in our time and serve. Otherwise, this country's going to be gone.
Okay. Let me go back now and we'll take some basic questions here so people will understand. For those that don't know, how would you define, Mark, the Illuminati? What are they?
The Illuminati is the sort of a secret society of the ruling elite, this secret establishment. It's basically an intersection of multiple secret societies, the pinnacle of the power structure in America and in the world. And it's a birth and really a modern day version of the ancient mystery schools back in Egypt and Greece. You had the early development of these fraternities and universities. And unfortunately, because knowledge is power, these fraternities have been hijacked and taken over by power-hungry men who, instead of acting as the servants of society, serve themselves, which is evident with, quote, fraternities like the Skull and Bones Society, which the mainstream media tells you is a fraternity. But guess what? They don't do any charity work. They don't do any community service. They don't do any fundraisers. People don't even join this organization until they're a senior. It's the farthest thing from a fraternity. And by the way, at Skull and Bones over there in Yale, they don't even allow alcohol in their clubhouse. So what kind of a fraternity, Jesse? It doesn't allow alcohol in their clubhouse.
We know one thing for sure. It's not the Deltas then.
And these individuals have a stepping stone to power, and while they've sort of become fairly well known in the mainstream media, people know of them, but they don't really know what they do. I mean, for example, George W. Bush, third generation Skull and Bonesman, he filled his cabinet and his entire White House with Skull and Bones members. I mean, the Security and Exchange Commission individual was appointed, William Donaldson, rather. Just a bunch of Skull and Bonesmen. Ed McNally was sent to Homeland Security. Robert McClellan was the Assistant Attorney General. Victor Ashe was put on the board of Fannie Mae. And we all know how Fannie Mae took care of America with the housing collapse.
Yeah.
It's a secret establishment. It's this sort of backroom brokerage firm. It's a consensus building establishment, essentially, and it manifests itself in various forms, like the Bilderberg Group, which you're familiar with, the Federal Reserve, which was birthed at a secret meeting on Jekyll Island and voted into law on the eve of New Year's Eve, or the eve of Christmas Eve, rather, when all congressmen were at home with their families, which is when the government rams through criminal, corrupt legislation like the National Defense Authorization Act that Obama signed into law on New Year's Eve a couple years ago, which allows him to, or supposedly grants himself and the government, the ability to strip citizenship from American citizens and just declare them an enemy combatant, preventing them from having the protections outlined in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. He signed it into law on Christmas Eve, New Year's Eve, sorry.
Mark, how can they get away with signing into law something that clearly violates the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, which is the law of the land? How can these laws be more powerful than the Constitution and Bill of Rights?
That's what I'm trying to figure out. And I think this also ties into the NSA spying, because I think that maybe perhaps a lot of these congressmen have some dirt in their lives. And with the NSA data collecting, they know your most intimate secrets. They know which one of these guys are cheating on their wives. They know who's going where, what's doing what. And I can't help but think that there's an entire blackmailing ring that's going around, that they would just have the quote men in black approach somebody and perhaps threaten them and their family. It's astounding that legislation like this, which should be appalling to most Americans, whether you're a Republican or Democrat or an independent, gets thrown into law. I mean, we have 10 basic rules or restrictions against the government. It's supposed to keep them in place, just 10 simple standards. But something like the NDAA just clearly violates it. It's astounding. And I think they just mix it in their legalese, Eastern establishment language to try to make it so convoluted that if you actually try to read through it on the surface, the average American can't figure out what it's trying to say.
Now, let's go to the Bilderbergs for a minute, because I want to tie myself in on that. Now, the Bilderbergs, they meet, right? They're named after that hotel and wherever it was that the first meeting took place, Bilderberg Hotel. But I felt offended. And Mark, maybe you can clear this up for me. I won the governor of the state of Minnesota, right? How come I wasn't invited to the Bilderberg thing?
And why is it that for 60 years, until about the last maybe 2 years because of social media, the mainstream media hasn't mentioned a peep about them? I mean, not a word. You can't tell me that this isn't newsworthy when you got 100 to 120 of the most powerful politicians, international royalty, banksters, media moguls, all meeting in a hotel that's shut down, surrounded by armed guards for 3 days. You can't tell me that's not newsworthy. You can't tell me that's not interesting.
But Mark, why wasn't I invited in? I'm offended over that. Is it because I was a true independent and not part of the clique?
Well, yeah, they don't obviously didn't want you to be involved with their consensus building. They know they have an assessment on you. You're not going to go along with it. This is the consensus building, inside establishment birthing place of new world order legislation. And so the people who are invited are seen as willing servants. And what's very interesting about the Bilderberg Group is for 60 years almost, it was just pretended to be non-existent. If you called into Sean Hannity or one of these big top-rated talk shows, Bill O'Reilly when he was on the air, Glenn Beck, if you were able to bypass the call screener, which some of the audience doesn't even know that they have screeners, you have to feed the call screener a topic and then they put it on the board and then the host knows what you're going to ask when he answers the phone. But a couple years ago, not 10 years ago now, I guess, I would call up and give him a bogus question and get on the board. And as soon as I was on the air, I'd ask him about the Bilderberg Group and record the calls, post them on YouTube. You can still find many of them. And they would pretend like they didn't even know what I was talking about. So here we have, these top-rated talk show hosts that have millions of listeners, that have presidents and top politicians on their shows, and you're telling me that they've never heard of the Bilderberg Group? So you can't tell me that there's not I don't want to use the word conspiracy, but you can't say there's not an agenda, an agreement between the Bilderberg Group and top media officials and the major news networks and print media to have kept the Bilderberg Group out of print for 60 years. And because, tying back to our talk on social media, now they sometimes will just hint at it or mention it because so many people know about it through social media or alternative websites and media that if they don't talk about it now, they're going to be seen as obviously covering it up. So they'll mention it, like CNN mentioned it once, Fox News mentioned it for 10 seconds 2 years ago. And they always throw in that, well, conspiracy theorists believe, conspiracy theorists are concerned. Oh, I'm sorry. It's just a conspiracy theory to think that 100 of the world's most powerful men meeting in a hotel for 3 days under locked armed guards, giving birth to new Orwellian policies is just something that's newsworthy. I'm sorry if I'm interested in that.
Yeah, gee, Now, let me ask this. Is it true you were able to get the Bilderberg Group's tax returns and financial statements?
Yes, that's one of my...
How did you manage that?
Well, because they have a bank account and somebody has to pay for the hotel and the armed guards. They pay the local police and some private security firms. And so they operate as a tax-exempt foundation. And if you're classified as a tax-exempt foundation, your tax returns must be available publicly to be reviewed if you know where to look. And so I got to thinking and I started poking around and I was able to find in an IRS official authentic database their tax returns for the last 5 or 6 years. And I can understand that people are skeptical. There's so much misinformation on there on the web. They're real. I verified it with the IRS and with their accountant. I've actually been into their office in Washington, D.C. with the documents in hand. And they did confirm that they do run the taxes, do the taxes for the Bilderberg Group. And what's particularly interesting about the tax returns, you can get them on markdice.com or just search for Bilderberg tax returns, Mark Dice on the internet. They're spending about $1 million a year for that conference, Jesse, because to rent out a hotel that has, 500 rooms, they have to compensate the hotel for that. So you multiply that by 3 days, and then you have the catering service, and then you have security, and they also pay for the travel expenses for a lot of their guests. And what's also interesting about the tax returns is that, and I have this all detailed in my new book, Inside the Illuminati, they also have to show legally who is giving them money. Okay, so they have donors which donate money to them because they have to get that $1 million from somewhere.
Yep.
And so they have members that are giving them money. And on that donor list is Henry Kissinger, $25,000. David Rockefeller, tens of thousands of dollars these guys are giving them every year or every few years, $50,000 from David Rockefeller.
Wait, let me interject this. When somebody like Rockefeller or Kissinger gives money to the Bilderbergs, and because it's called a non-profit or whatever they fall under, do they get to write that off their taxes?
I'm assuming that they do because they're classified as a tax-exempt charitable. They're a charity, Jesse.
So they're like the National Football League.
Yes, it's a scam. And some of the other names on there are the Washington Post. So we have a major media outlet literally giving tens of thousands of dollars to the Bilderberg Group, who then attends the Bilderberg Group, who then just pretends that they don't exist and covers it up. Bill Gates is on there, Microsoft. some other major big banks, Goldman Sachs, the infamous, just money manipulating mafia, Goldman Sachs, they're on the list. It's astounding. And when I first got them, I was so excited because I knew they were authentic, and then I verified them upside down and backwards, went to Washington, D.C. I shot a pilot for another show that never made it, and part of the episode was me confronting the Goldenberg tax preparer over there in D.C. at their office. So it's out there. You can download them if you want to. For the last, 5 or 6 years, I think I've posted on markdice.com.
Now, what's the Illuminati's ultimate goal? What is it that they're out there to do? To just literally control the world and everything that happens?
There's two goals, and this is where we start to kind of go real deep down in the rabbit hole. This is where we kind of go a little bit left field for some people. Their short-term goal is to just gain and maintain power. Of course, it's a way for them and their elite members and affiliates to sort of live as kings here on Earth, to be a part of the club, to have and amass an incredible amount of wealth and power, because they're intoxicated by the power. As you know, the power is intoxicating, as Lord Acton said. It's corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. Henry Kissinger said power is the greatest aphrodisiac. So these people are just power-hungry megalomaniacs. So their short-term goal is to just exercise that power and to gain and maintain wealth, really at the expense of others. And to do that, they infiltrated and took over or just started mainstream media or political groups and these front groups like the Federal Reserve.
Mark, we're talking about wealth here. How much wealth do they need? I mean, these are people that are so wealthy to begin with, they couldn't possibly spend their wealth in 10 lifetimes.
It becomes a contest to them. It's sort of like, I guess, perhaps, an Olympic athlete that just wants to get that gold medal and doesn't want to retire. It's an intoxicating contest.
It must be. It must be as addictive as nicotine because, how much money can you possibly spend? The people that are involved in the Illuminati probably have hundreds of millions of dollars already, if not billions. There's not enough things you could buy.
I often wonder why so many wealthy people even continue to work. I mean, into their 50s, into their 60s, because even if they like what they're doing, there's a lot of stress and a lot of issues that go along with what their jobs entail. And I just wonder, once you get a few $1 million, well, why don't you just retire and enjoy life, or do some charity work or something? But
play golf. I play golf.
Yeah, that's their short-term goal, and through their Darwinian, social Darwinistic "do what thou wilt" philosophy, through their occult, mystic teachings and secrets, that they use that to justify their dominance over the planet. But then, if you really start going down the rabbit hole, this is ultimately they're attempting to, and they may get close to doing it. They're attempting to turn turn Earth into heaven. They essentially will summon a dictator-like figure like a Hitler to rule planet Earth once they unlock the aging process, the anti-aging secrets through their transhumanist, cybernetic, genetic modification plans. And so the ultimate goal is to have a counterfeit Christ, Messiah type of dictator literally claim that he's God and offer mankind eternal, quote unquote, eternal life, quote, heaven on earth, if they will worship him. And to do that, they'll have to take this.
For real?
This fits in not only with Bible prophecy, but this fits in with transhumanist science. There's billions of dollars being poured into what's called transhumanism, where some of the top figures today, Peter Thiel, founder of PayPal and key investor in Facebook, Google owns an anti-aging company called Calico, and they actually plan to cure death. And so they believe, and this is called transhumanism because they're going to transition from a human into a god. And this is all this is what they believe, and this is what they're funding. To become an immortal god by manipulating the genes and the cells in the human body to stop them from aging or to regenerate organs through 3D printing or other methods, or as some people like Ray Kurzweil, the face of this, or Zoltan Isvan, another key transhumanist, they believe they will replace human body parts with cybernetic machinery mechanisms and literally upload the human brain into a computer where the consciousness of a human being can supposedly live forever in cyberspace. This is what they're planning on doing.
So in other words, these guys are modern day Dr. Frankensteins.
They're sick psychos is what they are.
Well, no, I mean, that's how I view it. Just like Dr. Frankenstein. They want to create life.
They want to create life. They want to avoid death, and they want to become a god. And this is at the heart of many dictatorships throughout history. You know, if you look at Nazi Germany, is the kind of the typical example, but we've seen it around the world, over in North Korea with Kim Jong-un. I mean, they think he's a god. They think that he is somehow divine and that he is either a messenger from the heavens, or that he somehow has this DNA from extraterrestrials or the gods in other galaxies, and he is somehow special.
You know why I don't believe that?
Why is that?
Look at him.
Well, but this is what you can brainwash.
No, I mean, he's one of the saddest looking individuals I've ever seen. The guy, the head of North Korea.
Yeah, he's a little troll. He looks like a little troll.
Yeah.
But this goes back to ancient Egypt. You know, the pharaoh either believed or told the general people that he was God, and they believed it because they didn't know any better. And they worshipped him as a god or as the son of God, as a descendants of the gods.
So we're to assume that all of us today would know no better either then. That's what they're assuming?
Well, if you look around, and I don't know if you've seen any of my petition videos from last year where I would go out and every week for almost a year, I got people to sign crazy petitions. You can see them on YouTube. Some of them have 1 million views. And I would approach people with a clipboard, and there was a hidden camera, and I would pretend to be an Obama supporter, and I had a petition with a headline with some insane claim about repealing the Second Amendment, repealing the First Amendment. And I would just go and approach people at the beach in San Diego here in Oceanside, and I would say, hey, will you support Obama and insert insane proposition here? And they would do it. Jesse, I got people, 15 people in 20 minutes to sign a petition to repeal the First Amendment, to get people to stop saying mean things about Obama. And they did it. They signed a petition to repeal the Second Amendment and to do door-to-door gun confiscations. I had people sign a petition to repeal the entire Bill of Rights to support Obama, just from telling them, hey, will you...
Mark, is this from the fluoride in the water?
You know, I think
is that what's clouding people's brains? I mean,
probably,
one of the things I like to tell people, and it wasn't by choice because I didn't learn about the fluoride till a few years ago, but all the homes I've owned, I've had my own well. Is that why I question things more than the average person does? Because they're all drinking the Prozac in the water as opposed to me not drinking it?
I think that has a lot to do with it. And
no kidding.
I think that also is the mind is a muscle. And if you don't exercise it, it degenerates. You know, I'm sure you've had friends, or perhaps you with your wrestling career have broken a bone, and when you get the cast off, your arm or leg is withered and it's shrunk and it's weak. And so people have shut off their brains. They're just not thinking anymore. They're not reading books. They're not exercising their brain. And that's the equivalent of, never getting off the couch. And we see with smartphones and social media now, people's brains are being rewired. The reward mechanisms are being manipulated, and they feel like they're winning a slot machine jackpot from the comments and from the feedback that they're getting from their social media. And they're so mesmerized with this celebrity culture, and they're Illuminati idols like Kim, the trash can Kardashian, and others, that they have shut off their brain. And so the mind is literally not storing data in the long-term memory anymore as much as it used to, because people don't have a priority. If you prioritize information, your memory will store it in the long term. If you come across a piece of data and you say, wow, this is important, like I need to remember this, your brain will prioritize it, more likely store it in long-term memory. But because people don't have a priority, they don't care. At the end of the day, their short-term memory, it's like the RAM in their computer. It just clears out and it gets replaced with other data, and that data is gone.
Let's move forward a little here, Mark, and I want to go to what I'm calling segment 2 with you. And these are now conspiracy theories on the Illuminati. You know, the Illuminati's this group, and there's a lot of theories about them. I would like to get your take on some of these theories, true, false, or just comment on them. Okay, theory number 1 on the Illuminati. The Illuminati are all Satanists.
That is true, actually. And for somebody
Really?
that's new to this, that seems completely ridiculous, because when you think of a Satanist, you think of just some trailer trash, tattooed loser that's sacrificing animals in his backyard. But if you really get down to the philosophical view of Satanism, there's 2 views of it. One is an atheistic type of Satanism, but the other is a theistic Satanism. And so they are Luciferians or Satanists. It's the same thing. And they actually believe that an entity, or perhaps an extraterrestrial, is the source of their knowledge. And so they believe that the creator, that this entity, I know I've heard you say that you're an atheist, but just follow me here. They believe that the entity, or what we would call God, that created the earth and created everything in here, was a substandard and evil entity that enslaved mankind as animals, as sort of robotic animals. And then they believe that the story about the Bible and the Garden of Eden and Satan coming in and talking to Adam and Eve, they believe that that's true in the sense that Christians do, but it's flipped around. Instead of Satan deceiving mankind, causing a disruption in the system, they actually believe that this entity, Satan, helped mankind and freed mankind from the enslavement from their creator God. And so that's the big secret, one of the big secrets. And this goes into a social Darwinistic philosophy where they don't necessarily believe in an afterlife, which is fine. You could still be a nice ethical person, but when you are indoctrinated in these egomaniacal teachings that they have within their occult fraternities, they become these ruthless, do what thou wilt individuals that see fellow human beings as just people in the way. They don't see any sort of divine repercussions for their actions. They certainly don't see any sort of an afterlife or a judgment or a weighing of your good deeds or your bad deeds or a divine judgment or anything like that. So since they believe that we're essentially just animals that have been given enlightenment from Satan, from Lucifer, or from some extraterrestrial entity, interdimensional entity, whatever you want to call it, some sort of supernatural thing, they believe that since they're the special ones, that they know the quote truth, that they could do whatever they want to do because they see us literally as no different than animals, and they see themselves sort of as the God, or the one that has the right to the top of the food chain.
Okay, interesting. Question 2, another conspiracy theory on Illuminati. The Illuminati killed JFK, Tupac, Bob Marley, and Michael Jackson.
I would agree with the JFK stance. Somebody like JFK was just, getting in their way, a problem to the establishment. But as far as these celebrity conspiracy theories and assassinations or blood sacrifices, as they're called, it's incredible, and it's a very I'm kind of disappointed in these celebrity conspiracy theories, because so many people now who think they're awake to the Illuminati focus so much on celebrities. And I myself do to some extent, but only to use them as a tool, as bait, really, to rope people in, to then educate them about real issues. But if you search YouTube for, and maybe you've done this, Tupac murdered by the Illuminati, Bob Marley murdered by the Illuminati, insert any celebrity name here was murdered by the Illuminati, you will find people that made YouTube videos and just they are convinced that the Illuminati has murdered Michael Jackson, Paul Walker and his car accident, Whitney Houston, you name it. And the reason for this, it's incredible, and I always get ridiculed and inflamed when I debunk these or when I address this issue. I get called an Illuminati for myself.
Why would the Illuminati kill these stars? What would be the what would be the reasoning for it? I guess I would ask.
Well, the reason they would kill somebody like JFK or...
Well, that I understand. I understand JFK is a world leader.
Yeah.
But Bob Marley, Michael Jackson, or Tupac, what would be... The question that would arise to me is, why would the Illuminati give a shit?
The reason for this is because the American culture and much of the world has such a celebrity love that they can't come to grips with the fact when a celebrity like Michael Jackson or Heath Ledger die from the drugs that they have been abusing, because the celebrities are seen as gods. They're portrayed in the media as these superhuman creatures, and they take on this aura of immortality. And so when a celebrity happens to die from a car accident, a drug overdose, or even a medical accident like Joan Rivers, 80 years old, Jesse, having a medical procedure, unconscious, has a problem, passes away immediately on YouTube. Countless people started posting videos. Joan Rivers was murdered by the Illuminati. And they come up with these ideas because she, quote, exposed Obama as gay and Michelle Obama as a transsexual because she joked about, I mean, let's face it, Michelle's a very, strong-looking, some say manly woman. And so they think that she, quote, exposed the secret, sex lives of the Obamas. And so they murdered her to get her out of the way. It's incredible. And sometimes I laugh at this, but Jesse, these videos get hundreds of thousands of views. And
But are the videos being done to deceive? I mean, for the purpose of making it cheapen the whole thing?
It could very well be, but unfortunately, even a large part of my audience, who perhaps many of which are potentially still in high school or college and still haven't really developed and learned the ways of the world, many of my audience even believe it, because when I do a video, debunking this and trying to bring people back down into reality, the trolls are insane. So it's potentially, that's a great idea. It very well could be the Illuminati sort of muddying the water, because now everything is the Illuminati. And so it's become the subject of ridicule almost, sort of like the term conspiracy theory. It just brings to mind a tinfoil hat wearing guy in his mother's basement, even though, there are patents by the United States government that can actually inject voices into people's heads and make it sound like the voice is coming from inside your own head. You can't triangulate it. So it kind of gives tinfoil hat a whole new meaning. But that's a whole other issue. But it could be that perhaps a couple of years ago they saw this happening and decided to muddy the water. But I have another theory about the celebrity interest in the Illuminati, in that this ties in with their ultimate goal. And you may not believe this, but just let this, kind of just bounce around in your head, or think about it, or, just take a look into my books and see if you can see what I'm coming at. When this counterfeit Christ, who's going to declare himself to be God and king of the earth, and he's finally unlocked the immortality, the general public are going to see him as God. I mean, look at what happened with Obama. I mean, they see him. Thank God, they're crying. Obama's going to pay my mortgage and pay my fill my tank up with gas. I mean, they see these figures as messiahs. And so ultimately this Illuminati messiah, who will just claim that he's God, and he's revealing the divine secrets of the universe that they've kept secret for all these years, the public will worship him as God. And so now the celebrities are painting the Illuminati as cool. My previous book, Illuminati in the Music Industry, has a whole list of celebrities in the music industry that have posed or pretended to be Illuminati and use Illuminati symbolism. And we have Katy Perry telling Rolling Stone that she wants to join the Illuminati. So we have these, celebrity superstars with tens of millions of fans saying how this Illuminati secret society is cool. And so the public now want to support it and want to be a part of it, as opposed to viewing them for the, the Bilderberg banksters, the money manipulating mafia, this criminal gang that they are. The general public now sees them as cool. And
maybe they're figuring if they can't beat them, they better join them.
That's what it is. And as you know, gangsters and hip hop rap mafia culture is portrayed as something that's very appealing to the public. And so what's more powerful than, perhaps the Italian mafia? What's more powerful than, John Gotti or some of these other mafia dons? Well, the Illuminati. And so the dumbed down public want to be a part of it. They would be willing servants of this system for a taste.
I got to ask you this next one because it ties into when I did my show Conspiracy Theory. After the Illuminati achieve the New World Order, their first order of business will to be round up all non-Illuminatis into FEMA camps?
Well, I do believe that they will be rounding up anybody who doesn't go along. So not non-Illuminati, but non-Illuminati supporters, because people like you and people like me are going to still recommend and demand that we have the Bill of Rights, that we have protections against this tyrannical government. But we've already seen the Bill of Rights is almost gone. I mean, the only one that's really still valid is the Third Amendment, which protects people from having troops quartered in their house. So I guess since they break into your house without a warrant, violating the Fourth Amendment, you don't have a trial by a jury violating the Sixth and the Seventh Amendment. They have cruel and unusual punishment, as we've seen with Bradley, Chelsea Manning, just having him in his cell, in his underwear, freezing to death, no trial for years. So there's the Eighth Amendment's gone. So pretty much as long as the troops who are violating all the rest of the amendments don't spend the night in your house, then I guess they're not violating the Third Amendment.
Well, they're getting close, though, because John McCain and what's his name, the guy from Michigan, added to the defense bill, the last one that went through, that allows the U.S. military to now operate inside the United States. So they're moving forward to destroying that Third Amendment, too, to where we'll be housing them in our houses pretty soon.
I wouldn't be surprised. In one of my petitions, which you can find on youtube.com/Mark Dice under the playlist of petitions, was me getting people to sign the petition to repeal the Third Amendment. I just went down the list. I just did them all. And then why not do the whole thing in Bill of Rights? And people signed the agreement that they would allow the troops to stay in other people's houses. But will they round up the non-supporters into the FEMA camps? They most likely will, because we're going to be seen as terrorists. We're going to be framed ultimately as these, sort of crazy, patriotic, right-wing extremists who just dare to want a Bill of Rights and just, want a trial and, want these things like a jury trial and these, due process if you're accused of a crime. But the public will be so dumbed down, and they will support this establishment candidate with no matter how Orwellian and anti-human, really, not only just anti-American, just anti-humane legislation they roll out. And so they will round up the non-supporters, Christians, Muslims, who are, most of which are not going to go along with this kind of legislation, and will be ultimately deemed as blasphemers for not wanting to take the life extension technology. Will be accused of being suicidal psychos because they'll be offering you eternal life through the transhumanist revolution. But these crazy, anti, government extremists, the resistance, are dangerous because they want to grow old and die and don't want to plug in the neural interface, mark of the beast, wiring the internet into your brain. And so, the FEMA camps are real. They're there, as you know.
We discovered them. In fact, I got read off on the floor of Congress for what I did on conspiracy theory of exposing them.
And part of the reason, not to defend the FEMA camps, but part of the reason why some of them are there is because there there is, as you know, I think you did a show on this, there's a possibility of a Carrington event, a solar flare striking the Earth. It's between a 9 to 12% chance in the next couple of years of a solar flare knocking us back to the Stone Age. It almost happened back in 2012. There wasn't a word about it in any major media until 2 years later. And then a couple little outlets said, oh, by the way, 2 years ago, we almost had all of our electronics fry. So if that were to happen, society would completely crumble and break down, and you would see just who knows how many, hundreds of thousands, millions of people potentially being thrown in prisons for violating the curfew, or having these centers turned into sort of refugee camps, et cetera, et cetera. But we have seen these FEMA camps activated in the past. In the 2004 Republican, I think it was the RNC, the Republican National Convention in New York City, or maybe it was the DNC, one of the conventions over there in 2004, when they had a bunch of big protests, and there was a FEMA camp secretly built and then activated on Pier 57. It was in an old bus depot, just an abandoned bus depot where they used to just go and park city buses or school buses, was turned into a FEMA camp. And there were photos that came out, and they admitted that they took protesters there. Thousands of people were thrown into these FEMA camps secretly, and you could see there were barbed wire prison fences inside this bus depot where they literally took thousands of people, and this thing was built and ready to accept them, and did. So you can't tell us that these FEMA prisons that can accept tens of thousands of people, perhaps more, aren't already built. We have the contracts. We've been outside of some of them.
Now, Mark, what do you do with the Illuminati deniers and critics? What do you say to those who believe this is all nonsense, that the Illuminati doesn't exist, and it's only a conspiracy theory?
I'm a big fan of documentary films and books, because sometimes we can't articulate this information as well as we would like when we're having a conversation. But if somebody can sit and flip through a book, or if you could sit them down and have a DVD viewing party, the information is packaged and polished and presented in a very easily understandable way. And so that's why I wrote my books, Inside the Illuminati, available on Amazon.com or downloaded on any e-reader. And there's just page after page after page of evidence, footnotes, documentation. And it's a slow process, but sometimes I don't even like to give pearls to pigs, as they say, because sometimes you can lead a horse to water, and not only will it not drink, but it'll try to kick you in the face. So sometimes you can't just waste your time. But if somebody is genuinely interested, or you can pique their interest through a book, through a documentary, you can give them just hours and hours of data. I mean, years of research compacted into several hours of a presentation, and they can see it for themselves. And the books will be able to answer a lot of questions that perhaps you can't. But we're doing it. Look what we've done with social media. Look what we've done. Who would have thought that a show like yours could have actually covered some of the issues that we've been able to cover? And some of the people say, well, Jesse works for the Illuminati. He was allowed to put that show. And these people give the Illuminati too much credit.
Really? Wait a minute, Mark. Really? People really thought that I worked for the Illuminati, and that's why I was allowed to do conspiracy theory?
Yes. So, these
No
same
kidding?
people. There are probably tens of thousands of people out there that believe this, Jesse. And these are the same people who believe that because I do not believe in the Tupac Illuminati assassination, that they think that I am what they call controlled opposition. Even though I've released the Bilderberg tax returns, I have, published the original writings in English translations of the Bavarian Illuminati writing. I've done incredible work, but I'm covering up the celebrity sacrifices.
Mark, let me state right now to you on this podcast, I don't know anybody in the Illuminati. I don't know if I've ever met anybody who's with the Bilderbergs. If they have, they haven't told me that. I can unequivocally tell you that this kid from South Minneapolis who went to Roosevelt High School is not part of the Illuminati.
And that's why I said in the beginning of the interview, you know, while nobody agrees with somebody else politically 100%, I have a lot of respect for you because I know that the stances that you take aren't being fed to you from an analyst or from a think tank, and you're not trying to appease this group and avoid pissing off this group. You shoot from the hip and say what you mean. And a lot of people in the conspiracy community, unfortunately, equate somebody disagreeing with them or having a political view that they disagree with. They misinterpret that as, instead of being, oh, well, he's a human being, he has different world experiences, he has a different analysis of the data, different conclusion. They equate it with, well, he's covering it up. Like, I got that phone call from David Rockefeller, and he said, "Oh, Agent Dice, I need you to cover up the Tupac assassination. You know, if too many people are learning the truth about our celebrity sacrifices, I need you to put out a disinformation video."
Yeah.
So we unfortunately, many people in this material can sometimes make people paranoid because, I mean, let's face it, it's disturbing when you come to realize the incredible amount of lies, frauds, crimes that this establishment has been committing, their plans, their un-American, human agenda. They're poisoning people. They're testing on human subjects. They're fraudulent wars. It can really shake you and scare you. And so, unfortunately, some people kind of become unhinged, and then they just don't even know who to believe. They just think everybody's Illuminati.
Finally, Mark, we're going to go to some social media questions if you're ready for them. Ready?
Sure.
Okay. We've come to the last segment of the show. We've pulled some questions from users on Conspiracy Theory Forum called Above Top Secret. These are all anonymous submissions. We're using their Above Top Secret names here as reference. First up is Alistair, who has this to say: the catch-all name Illuminati has been hijacked and beerjacked by people who, not realizing that bringing light and knowledge into a world controlled by church, crown, and state had unselfishness and caring for the human race at its core. Now people think that the name means oppression and control, just the opposite of what the group stood for.
Well, if you look at partially he is correct, because the original Illuminati in Germany, started by Adam Weishaupt, a law professor, did want to counter the control of the Catholic Church, which, let's face it, was tyrannical and inhumane. And so they did want to...
No, not the Catholic Church. How can that be, Mark? Oh, man.
So
anyway, go ahead.
In a sense, he's correct to a degree, because they did want to and work to shatter that stranglehold that the Catholic Church held, and it still holds to some extent to this day. But unfortunately, Weishaupt and his inner circle became power hungry, and instead of acting like the founding fathers of America, who understood that we all are flawed and we all need a check and a balance to hold ourselves accountable in our moments of weakness, the Illuminati essentially wanted to hijack, and did hijack, the Catholic Church's power. Instead of creating a republic or a free society, they basically worked to replace the Catholic Church's power, where our founding fathers created a check and balance system and signed their names, which could have been a death warrant, to the Declaration of Independence. Adam Weishaupt and his other cohorts worked in secret to sort of replace the Catholic Church's power. And I mean, Weishaupt himself was essentially used the same methods as the Jesuits, an ends justifies the means kind of a tactic. And the word Illuminati does mean enlightened ones. And so on the surface, it appears to be, well, they're the enlightened ones. They just are for knowledge and for freedom. But I mean, to believe that would be to believe that the Patriot Act is patriotic.
Yeah, very good. I always call the Patriot Act, they should call it the act of treason.
That's what it is.
Anyway, Tinfoil TP, here we're going to piggyback on what you just said a little bit. Are the Illuminati a product of the Jesuits, like some people speculate?
They're sort of a faction of the Jesuits. The Jesuits are sort of the power engine within the Catholic Catholic Church. And they had this and have this philosophy, an ends justifies the means, essentially a criminal organization that did everything that they could to prevent the Protestant Reformation from reducing the Catholic Church's hold on power. And so Weishaupt was taught by the Jesuits. He used Jesuit tactics. Some people believe that it is a spin-off of the Jesuits, but it's almost a competing faction. They use the same tactics, the same type of philosophies, both struggling in a sense for the power. Because if you read the original writings of the Illuminati, which I publish in English, they're written in German, of course, in my book, Inside the Illuminati, you'll find that Adam Weishaupt actually despised the Jesuits, and one of his cohorts, when he decided to leave, actually called him, he said that he was using Jesuitism, or he was a latent Jesuit. But I could see why people would think that, because they have the same sort of tactics, but it's almost the same method of operation, trying to struggle both to be the king of the hill.
Okay. Now, it came from outer space, commented. I see the Illuminati as a metaphor for the powers that be, or the mafia, if you will. Any money-driven form of power and control, not so much one secret society controlling it all.
That would be correct. It's sort of an umbrella term today. Back in the 1700s, it was a tight-knit organization, but its philosophy has branched out, and it has given birth to this network of like-minded individuals. And so there doesn't really need to be a conspiracy to do what they do. It's an agenda. And that's why the Italian mafia, we called them the mob or La Cosa Nostra, which really means this thing of ours. So the Italian mafia, which doesn't really have all that much power in America today, the Russian mafia, and there's a whole other story, but they didn't have a name. So they didn't call each other up and say, hey, we got this mafia meeting today. They would say, hey, we got this thing of ours. We got to do our thing, because they knew what that thing was. And so the Illuminati is doing their thing, and it's morphed into these various, sister societies and front groups like the Bilderberg Group or the Council on Foreign Relations. And so they're all doing their, quote, thing, which is building to this elite agenda, essentially working in concert with each other. So it sort of is an umbrella term. I don't think that they would call each other up and refer to themselves as the Illuminati, although occasionally perhaps just in jest, but they have sort of pretended or somewhat legitimized their activities into these tangible groups like Bilderberg and Federal Reserve, et cetera.
One question had this to say. I think the term Illuminati is the first and biggest mistake. It's inaccurate from my research. I can see some sort of connection to an Egyptian mystery school. Whoever these people are, they are practicing a religion. Everything they do is a ritual to honor the gods or God, whatever it is they believe.
Well, the Illuminati has sort of become the term to describe this ideology or this interconnecting network, and people call them various things: the globalists, the elite, the invisible empire, the establishment, et cetera, et cetera. And up until just a few years ago, the Illuminati term was very descriptive, but as we've talked about earlier, it's been watered down, and now many people just believe it's a secret society of celebrities in Hollywood. And I have people from Nigeria actually contacting me almost on a weekly basis now, wanting to join the Illuminati, Jesse, because word got out over there that the Illuminati is how you become rich and famous and successful. And so now the people over there in Africa have heard these things, and they keep contacting me wanting to join.
Mark, is there an application? Could you send me one?
Now, what's interesting is you're familiar with the Nigerian prince scam, the email scam that started going around in the 1990s that duped and still may dupe a lot of people into giving money to get at a supposed inheritance. So now there are Nigerian scam artists that are sending out emails instead of giving $1,000 to transfer Prince so-and-so's money into an American account and he'll split it with you. Now they're literally sending out emails offering to join the Illuminati if you pay them like $1,000 or something.
So we can go on the record and say if you're contacted from Nigeria with an offer to join the Illuminati, it's a scam?
Yes, unfortunately, unless you're attending Yale University or Oxford or a lower level CFR or Federal Reserve member, you're not going to really get that invitation.
Okay. Finally, last one. General Eyes says, the modern Illuminati is little more than a pop culture catchphrase that has been mass-produced in order to be digestible by the impressionable masses, and they're eating it up by the fistful, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Very accurate. I wouldn't really deny that. In a sense, ties into what we talked about earlier, how it's morphed from this political banking establishment into a secret society of celebrities. I mean, there was even a show on the entertainment channel called Secret Societies of Hollywood. And everybody now, instead of looking at the Illuminati as being the money manipulators and the political elite, starting the wars, introducing just illegal legislation, they see them as just a bunch of celebrities. And so unfortunately, it sort of has morphed into this pop culture phenomenon. It's a double-edged sword through social media.
And maybe they want it to do that. Maybe they want it to be that way, so it's a good cover-up.
It is. It's muddied the water so much that when you now mention it, somebody talks, oh, the Illuminati, oh, I got some Doritos. My Doritos are in the Illuminati because it's in the shape of a triangle. Or and so it's an unforeseen effect of social media. Years ago, I started wondering, wow, people are learning about this. There's a lot of books. We're going to expose them. How are they going to possibly deal with this? And now we have in the 2010s this interesting, strange phenomenon of the Illuminati being known by almost everybody, at least anybody that's on social media. And now, instead of really understanding that it's this invisible empire, this globalist gang, now many people have been just so brainwashed and fed so much misinformation, celebrity assassination, sacrifices, that they just simply dismiss it as a fictional conspiracy.
There you go. Well, anyway, Mark, we're gonna end there. We're running out of time, but I want to tell you, I'm looking forward to reading your book when I get down to Mexico, where I do the majority of my reading. Thank you very much for being the guest on We the People podcast today. Very enlightening to learn about somebody that's actually studied the Illuminati and knows a great deal about them. So thank you very much, Mark.
Thank you. It was an honor. Appreciate it. Anytime.
Very good. Mark Dice, we want to thank him for joining me today. And that's it, people, for this week's episode of We the People. But remember, as Mark Dice would say to you and I say to you, stay vigilant. It's your job to do so.
This is Corolla Digital.